So it is his birthday, as I said. So we wish him, all of us will wish him happy birthday. He is really, to use a word that Kenneth Frampton used vis-a-vis Adolf Loos, an enigma. And I think it is appropriate to use this word about Paul Andreu. He is an enigma. He was an enigma, a very accomplished architect, but he was also a writer. Apparently, he published even fiction and also painted. So he was also a painter, but he was also an engineer, and he built airports. So no surprise, he said that he needed several lives. Well, he only got one, but he made the most of it. And I think in this respect, he's a role model, so to speak. But he's a model, an enigma also from other points of view, a little more subtle, and I hope I can address them a little later on. He was an enigma for me, and he still is a little bit. Okay, so in French, I found this expression about him, Paul Andreu, un architecte qui donne des ailes. This is because he built airports, so it gives you wings, so to speak. These are the rhetorics of newspapers. Then Paul Andreu, I would only take on, and this I mentioned, I would only take on a project if the ideas were mine. Otherwise, I am not interested. So, talking about egocentrism, in the Renaissance, you had great masters working together on the same building. And I'm not saying that in the Renaissance, architects didn't have a big ego. They had. But now, somehow collaboration between important or famous architects it does happen, but it also has problems, and it's maybe not very often it happens. Okay, now this is I'm not sure actually. It might be that it is an airport that he did, and then it is transformed through photoshopping. But I like the picture, and it's kind of connected with that quotation that he is the architect who gives wings, although here the wings are kind of, dark, so to speak. Anyway, this is the gentleman. I always like to start with pictures of the person, even fragmented like this. You can count the hair on his right cheek, if it amuses you. He's an interesting man, and somehow you wouldn't expect him to be. I mean, he has a certain melancholia almost, or I don't know why I think of Bernini when I see pictures of him. And there are other pictures even better, expressing this strange, kind of strange, almost anachronistic face. I think he was an interesting and complex man. And even more interesting is the fact that he started his own office at 63. So until 63, he became famous for building airports, but he worked for a big French corporation. And he had at one moment, as he declared, 400 people under him. So he was kind of like Patrick Schumacher now, once Zaha Hadid left us, or like Zaha Hadid, who had, 450 people, employees. Well, they were not his employees, but they were under him. He was responsible for a very large team. And he declared that at 63, he got tired of airports after he built 25 airports. Can you believe it? 25 airports, but he designed around 60. So, an airport is not an easy matter. It's not a small little hut, in the mountains. It's a very complex and very large program. He built 25, and at 63, as I said, he got tired, and so he opened his own office, but he was also spoiled by China because he began to receive very large commissions in China, and he felt obliged towards China, so much so that for his biggest accomplishment in China, that is the big national performing arts center in Beijing, he actually did some ceramic tiles. He engraved some tiles for that big project with his own hand. Something he said he always wanted to do. He always wanted to do with his head, but also with his hands, and not necessarily in this order. Maybe he was ill here, but I like his discreet elegance, and I don't know, it's something about him that I like, but he's still an enigma for me. And I'm attracted by enigmas, so I will continue to learn about him. But for now, I will present to you what I know. This is a painting by him, of him, a self-portrait. And now we look at some drawings. The drawings are maybe not very impressive, but anyway, some of them are so-called visionary, you know, they are visionary drawings. At least this is one of them. This is less visionary. This is actually a plan. I think is the airport Charles de Gaulle in Paris, one of his earlier works, but an excellent work. And if you go to Paris and if you land in Charles de Gaulle, you'll be right there in the work of Paul Andreu. Other drawing, anyway. He also wrote a book, De Lettres à un jeune architecte. I don't know why it's par Fata Morgana, there is par Paul Andreu, Fata Morgana. It's probably an interesting book. What I read is that he also was an accomplished writer. I mean, fiction, not theoretical works. This is again the man with a sketch that was, you know, scaled up on a wall or in an exhibition. He does look like an intense man, an introverted man. I mean, it is remarkable. This man who built 25 airports was also a civil engineer and also a fiction writer and also a painter. And anyway, now we start with this, what is strange in a way. Wait a minute, I'm a little bit confused. Because this presentation has something unique, and I almost apologize. I probably have to apologize. I start with his latest work. That's how I built the PowerPoint presentation. I moved backwards, not forwards. I don't know exactly why I did so. Because I was intimidated, I think, by the list of his works on Wikipedia, the French one, which had many more works, but at least half of them were actually competition entries. He did a lot of works for competitions, and I imagine some of them, or most of them, he didn't win. But now, this was just, I wanted to start with this one, but this one will be actually at the end, because as I said, although the work itself lasted until 2003, but I will start with his latest work, the one that he did just before he died. And it's a cité municipale, it's a municipal building, you know, a governmental building in Bordeaux in France, perhaps not very impressive. You know, you have seen such architectures. You almost feel tempted to think that that pole is supporting the cantilevered part of the building. It is not. That's what I thought at first, but it's in the foreground, that pole. So please make abstraction a bit. It's a building like you have seen maybe many times. But he was, I think, an excellent organizer. I mean, to do an airport properly, you do have to be an excellent organizer. And by the way, he was the consultant for Renzo Piano in Japan, for the airport that Renzo Piano built there. So, of course, he had a lot of experience. You have to handle very well, you know, circulations and many other complex functions. He was probably very good at it. You are surprised, and I am surprised that the same man also wrote fiction. Maybe he also wrote poetry, and he also painted. Bravo to him. I think we need such people with various interests, equally intense in all of them, and in other words, not just scratching the surface of some other domains. No, being present in them, so to speak, like a true Renaissance person. Inside the building is though more interesting than the outside, I think. Uh, um, kind of like it, it's, yes, it is symmetrical, yes, it is, civilized, but it is supposed to be civilized because it's a governmental building. But it has character and it has honesty, and I think it's okay. Maybe it's not a masterpiece, but it's not a work to be necessarily timid about or ashamed of. Anyway, now we arrive at
the Jinan Chin.
hello. Please be kind and turn off the microphone, because otherwise we create more chaos here than we should. Anyway, we go now to a building that is almost a signature building by him in China after he opened his own office. It was built between 2010 and 2013, the opera in Jinan. You can, after you see several works by him, you kind of understand that he had a certain formal interest in I mean, he could be a little bit predictable, I think, and that is maybe a weaker part of his work. But he also loved novelty, but not for the sake of novelty. Of course, such buildings are being built and were built in the last years in China. He had immense success in China. He was even given a teaching position at a very high level in architecture, and he was flooded with commissions. And he was very grateful to China that it had confidence in him. Now, yes, many architects built in China, and it was their luck that China opened up, at least to some signature pieces by signature architects. And I actually think that I don't know. I mean, it was China's way to accelerate its coming into modernity, I guess. But the richest part of China is actually their village. And there are thousands of villages that have been abandoned. And there is immense potential there, not in the big cities, but in their villages. I have a book from 1920s published by the Germans, a beautiful book with old China. And I saw the unbelievable beauty in otherwise impoverished villages, but extremely interesting and picturesque and romantic and spiritual, even with pagodas, scattered over the hills. Very, very, very beautiful. There is an immense potential. China truly has, at this point, an immense treasure in its hands, and this is its rural culture. And even Ma Yan-song from Med Architects confessed that this is the future for China, not the big cities, the villages. Okay, so this is the building, another cultural center. They built a lot of cultural centers, performing arts centers, theaters and operas. Sometimes they are called operas, but they are more than just an opera. Even here, you see there are several buildings. Yes. Well, again, we have seen buildings kind of similar to this one. Even Renzo Piano built in Rome, a music center, not not very dissimilar to this one to an extent. So I guess he was not excessively original, but as Miss would have said and did say, the idea is not to be original, but not to do necessarily an original building, but to do a good building. And I think his buildings function well because trained as he was with airports, I think he was able to handle complex matters quite well. And the interior is impressive, you know, is apparently simple or almost simplistic, but there is a well controlled monumentality and even a sense of scale. I think it's a good interior, and he was quite able to handle, you know, big spaces, huge spaces, like a man who built 25 airports. You know, at the first sight, even the, you know, the performance rooms themselves seem to be fine. So there are various, because there are several buildings there. So these are quite ample programs. The skyscrapers or the towers are not his. So this is the work prior to the last one that he built before he died. An interesting, I don't know what it is, this huge wall for media arts, for some kind of, I don't know, is it an artwork or it displays messages? Maybe someone who is more more knowledgeable about this than me could tell us. But you can see the scale; it is huge. If it was in a train station or on an airport, you'd have said, you know, the arrivals and the departures are announced. But this one displays maybe, I don't know, the map of the world, or I don't know what it is. Anyway, it is huge, as it is to be in China, I guess, unless, as I said, you build in a village. So China has at this point a large amount of operas and theaters and performing arts centers. You would say that, you know, they are going to the theater every day of the week. I wonder, you know, because they are very hardworking, you know. Anyway, they are ready for the time of you know, watching plays and concerts and so on. This is the plan of 3 buildings of the complex. A section. So I guess if you know how to handle this carcass, you can make the building almost doesn't matter how, and then you cover it with this carcass, which is doing the job. But it helped him that he was also a civil engineer. Okay, the archaeological museum in Taiwan from 2010, not very dissimilar compared to the previous work, although you will see the image of the building or pavilions is a little bit different. Maybe, I don't know, a little bit pop, but discreetly so. I would rather say that it's more about some kind of archetypal architecture, and he does seem to have an interest in architectonic archetypes. He also has a side which is, you know, you could call it a little bit so-called commercial or predictable, but maybe it's unavoidable when you handle, you know, such large programs. And when your experience was with, you know, building 25 airports and designing around 60, if I remember correctly. Okay, Here you also have the dialectics between the green of the grass and the redness of the pavilions. And it's always good, even if you allow me a suggestion. I am a terrible cook, but if you cook and you think about colors of whatever you are, putting on the plate, it does matter. Because if you have a plate where you combine green with red or other colors, it could become very appetizing, also because of the colors, of the chromatics of the dish. I experienced this and I think it is true. But here it's about something else. Now, a complex of casinos, hotel, commerce, bureaus, offices, and houses, housings in Macau from 2005. Here was not very clear to me. I couldn't find a lot of pictures, but that silhouette there is interesting, but I'm not sure what is going on there, and I don't have other pictures, and I apologize. Now we have from 2004, 2007, a hotel for Oriental Arts in Shanghai, and there are other things, so it's a hybrid program, 200 rooms and a center of affairs, business center. In English, it was named in this way, Oriental Arts Center in Shanghai, from 2000 to 2004. Again, you kind of see what he is about, because this building is his, in the sense that it's not very dissimilar from the previous ones that we saw. He uses these pavilions that he brings together, and the pavilions are, maybe the word is not quite appropriate, some are larger than others, and there is something organic here, but not excessively so. Anyway, large volumes, maybe he could have done even an airport like this, and maybe he did. Inside, again, I think he's handling very well a sense of monumentality without being really oppressive, and you can also see the structure, at least of the skin of the carcass. An interesting architect, maybe not very spectacular, maybe a little bit predictable, but someone you can count on. And I imagine his spaces and his buildings are functioning well. Again, I think he was helped by the fact that he was an architect, but he was also, although it wasn't very clear to me what kind of education he received, but he is described as being both a civil engineer and an architect. Kind of sad now, these large spaces, for performing arts where there is no one, but I'm sure they could take care of that. So this is the plan. I don't know. I mean, Mad Architects did something probably a little more interesting, a little bit, in a similar way, but more spectacular. The section is not flamboyant. It's in fact rather modest, at least in this part of the building. A picture out of focus, and I apologize. This is also mysteriously out of focus, but that's how I found it. And again, a picture that you saw, and another picture with this building. And now we arrive at an administrative center, again in China. So as I said, this gentleman opened his office at 63. I don't think too many architects did something like this. It's remarkable that at this age, he changed his life dramatically. Until then, as I said, he worked for a large corporation, a French one that built a lot of airports. And now we arrive at the airport in, no, unfortunately, I couldn't find pictures with this one, but don't worry, you will see a lot of airports. Then another, no, this is, yes, it is a Center for Oriental Arts in Shanghai. Sorry, this is the same building that we just saw. And now we arrive at his most important building, as it is considered, the Grand Theatre, the National Performing Arts Center in Beijing, in Shanghai, in Beijing. So, National Center for the Performing Arts, or Opera de Peking. Beijing is also known as Peking. From 1997 to 2007, 1999 to 2007. So for 8 years, he labored at this building, and together with him, an army of people. But they built an immense jewel. It's not seen in this picture as dramatically as is capable of, but you will begin to see that we are dealing here with the most important building in the field of performing arts in China. And it's not a little thing. This economical superpower, China, this huge country with a huge population, invested Paul Andreu with a task to build its national theater. And this only shows how appreciated he was. So it's, again, the engineering here is maybe even more important than the architectural aspects, although they are not divorced. Here, as in other buildings by him, architecture and engineering come together with equal relevance. And like it happened, in some other times. And I think this is something worth exploring, because as opposed to Jean Nouvel, for example, declared kind of recently that in the past, a certain past, let's say 20 years ago or 30 years ago, architecture was supposed to express honestly its structure. But that in the later years, let's say in the 21st century or so, architecture was good when it hid the sophistication and the complexity, and in a way that its structural truth. So this is what Jean Nouvel said, that today good buildings do not show the whole truth about how they were built or about their structure. Anyway. But this is not the case here. You see how the building was built. He's not hiding anything. And the aesthetical values of the structure are obvious and relevant. He also plays in the sense that he plays in an ornamental way, but at the scale of the building, and these are not little ornaments added to the walls. He's an artist who understands also architecture very well, I think. And the interiors are, how to describe them? Maybe decent, but this is not a very appreciable word. Maybe more than that. They are good. I think they are good. A little bit predictable for those who want strong, stimulants or provocative statements. But you see his honesty. This is an honest builder and an honest architect and artist and an honest engineer who brings together his knowledge about various fields and does so without a need to impress necessarily, although the scale of the building is in itself impressive, to say the least. I like this, and this is apparently the Chinese way, the traditional way of showing the facades. of a building, just in this way. And so this is the building. This is the National Theatre of China. And you see the four elevations and you see the top view. This was done and maybe it could be used, this system of representing architecture in a legitimate way, because it's logical and it's clear. Yes, you have to rotate the print in a way, but even this image is kind of interesting. It's a functional diagram. It shows the plans, but it has some mystery and it has some sensitivity. I mean, this I would hang on the wall as a graphic work, with graphic values, artistic values beyond the description, the section. But he uses the same method. He builds the architectonic functional organism, and then he covers it with this cupola or carcass that is most of the time, round. Some would say, well, it seems a little bit too simple or simplistic, but I don't know, because there are images of this building that are very impressive. And they do represent the prowess of technology today. I'm not so sure about this entrance but maybe, when you enter, you actually do not see the splendor of the building. It's a little bit hidden. Maybe that's the correct strategy. It's just that this entrance at the bottom, we saw the first picture, seems to be a little, I don't know, not inviting enough for my taste. But on the other hand, I think it's a good strategy to not betray, to not reveal everything from the beginning. So you offer the surprise once you pass by through this threshold, above this threshold, through this entrance, then you will have the discovery of what this building is. Also, I noticed something now, since I've been doing these PowerPoint presentations, and some of them are about China. The Chinese seem to be very fond of having water in the close proximity of buildings. In fact, many of their buildings, of the important buildings, are built on water, and this is something worth thinking about. I don't think too many countries do this, and I think the vicinity between the closeness between building and water is an inspiring one. Of course, that water is brought artificially there, as you can see. It's not, but yeah, I think that the Chinese love this, to have a building communicate and be in the vicinity of water. And yes, the water allows for reflections, and also softens even the harshest, architectonic image. Also, the water, I don't know if you know, but it's an occasion for me to suggest to you to read Lao Tzu or Lao Tse, the great philosopher, paradigmatic figure of the Chinese spiritual landscape. Together with Confucius, Lao Tzu or Lao Tse, his name is written and is spelled a little differently, either T-Z-E or T-Z-U. I have great affection for Lao Tzu or Lao Tse, and I will explain in a few words to you why. Apparently, and I'm not an expert in Chinese spirituality, but I did read a little book that Lao Tzu wrote, meaning the Tao, and maybe you heard about it, the Tao of life, which is an unbelievably beautiful and poetical and wise little book. It's very small. It only has 80 sayings almost. It's not a treatise, it's not a, a big book, it's a very discreet book. And it was written apparently by the wise men of China. China had traditionally two wise men. One was Confucius, who was the ethical figure and the pragmatic philosopher. And then you had the mystic, who was Lao Tzu. And the legend says that Lao Tzu or Lao Tse was the responsible for the library of the emperor. And when he was 80 or so, when he was older, he left the city, the capital, and at the gate, the keeper of the gate told him, wise man, I am not allowing you to leave unless you put down your wisdom in a book. So apparently the Tao of life, it's spelled Tau, Tao, that's how it was born. I mean, this is the legend. But because I remember this in connection with water, I will attempt to tell you in a very few words what is the relationship between water and Lao Tzu. His philosophy is based on this. It is called the philosophy of the weak or weakness. And he says water seems to be weak compared to the stone. But the truth is, water in time erodes even the strongest rock. And it is true. He also said that a blade of grass, when the thunderbolt strikes, resists, survives, while the proud oak, the masculine proud oak, dies when the thunderbolt strikes it. So his entire philosophy stresses the strength, the intrinsic subtle power of what we call usually weak or weakness. Is really a beautiful little book, and I repeat again, I strongly recommend that you read it. It was translated in many languages, if not all the languages of the world. The problem is, it's hard to find a good translation. I read myself 2 or 3 translations, and only one seemed closer to me in the sense that I understood it better. Otherwise, it's mysterious, but it's very, very beautiful. And I will end by telling you that actually this little book at one point saved my life. When I was very, very depressed, I was living in the United States, and I was kind of struck. Well, I was never an oak, but I had some illusions that I was solid, and I had some, verticality and power. And then troubles came in. So I was kind of like that oak that was struck by the thunderbolt. And because of Lao Tzu, who showed me that even if you are humbled by life, and we all are sometimes in our lives, you can resist. You can reinvent yourself, starting from the bottom in a way, with the wisdom of the blade of grass or water. Enough with Lao Tzu. We go back to the big performing arts center in Beijing, and it has interesting things. This play with concavity and convexity, which is always good to employ because it brings in dynamism, and it is actually about the yin and yang, since we are talking about China. So if you have a concave curve and then a convex curve, if you try to play with them, something interesting might help you. I think it's a good building, and yes, it seems kind of simple, but considering the sophisticated technology used and the scale and the ample spaces and the ample functions that he had to solve, I think he did well. And this is the plan. with a little bit of its ambience or the environment. Section is not so good. We look again at an image. Then this one, it changes. It's covered with titanium and it is. I don't know exactly how they do it. I saw pictures, and you will see one too, which is totally blue, and we see it in this way. So I guess this mysterious unidentified flying object could have some chameleonic qualities. Look at this; it's the same building. Now I don't know if it was the photograph was manipulated or not. Maybe not, but the proximity of the water allows for this holistic or whole image being produced from the conjunction of the real building and its reflection on water. Now we see a gymnasium from 1998 and 2001, also that he did after he opened his office, his own office. Here he tried to mimic a little bit the hills in the proximity of this city, as you kind of see here. And here again, the structure is impressive and honestly externalized, as you can see here. But he doesn't have the flamboyance of Calatrava, and this is something I like. Yes, he is using structure in at a large scale, and it is exposed, but without that expressionism technique, as it was called, of Santiago Calatrava. Now we see something built in Japan by him, the Osaka Maritime Museum, 1998 to 2000s. Yeah, well, the same kind of architecture. Sorry I don't know why people didn't focus better, but you see it here in a better way. So yeah, he deserved the luck, but he also had the luck of big commissions in coming from various countries. And this is an encouragement for anyone who wants to have a full life and to earn one's life. It is possible through passion, through hard work, through seriousness, through sensitivity. If you dedicate your life to architecture in this sense, sooner or later, I think some good results would happen. But it is important also to have to desire, to want more. And I think the last image of this presentation is with a quotation from him, or a quotation of someone about him, that he always wanted to discover something new. And this is something true about any great artist or architect or writer or poet or engineer or you name them. There is this curiosity, this continuous desire to explore something new. That is the child within who asks questions and wants something else. In other words, they do not like the dogmatic way of life. They hate dogmas. They want creativity, and nature is a great lesson of every year rejuvenating itself. And I think we should do the same thing, or try to do the same thing, to rejuvenate ourselves. Okay, so Paul Andreu again. Again, an unfocused picture, but that's how I found it. It seems this cupola was actually built not on place, but was brought, at least parts of it, but a major, important part, and was, descended from the sky, so to speak, on the building. How else am I to interpret this picture? But this is a very large object, if I can call it so, probably inappropriately. Now we arrive at his other masterpiece, which was an earlier one. As I said, this presentation started with his latest buildings and moves towards his beginnings. And he built 3 airports or 3 terminals at Charles de Gaulle Airport. This is the earliest from 1967. No, it's not the earliest, sorry. Or is it? I think it's the earliest, but they continue to work and add, and so it actually lasted the work there until 2000s and something, and they will continue to work. But what he did from 1967 to 1974 is very interesting. From afar, and if you arrive in Paris by plane, Paris is served by a few airports, but it might be that you land here. And from the outside, maybe it's not so impressive, but inside is very interesting, and we'll see pictures of it. It's interesting that in those years, he played with his, connections, these bridges so freely, you would say that maybe almost a deconstructivist to do something like this. Well, he did it with 50 years earlier. And a courageous, manipulation of functions and spaces for any time. Here he had a problem. A portion of the airport collapsed, and apparently he was not accused, but there was a big turmoil. And apparently he said that that the building was not quite built respecting the specifications of the project, and so on. An airport is, I don't know now with the pandemic, and of course the pandemic is changing many things. People will travel less, at least for the time being. But at that time, when he said that in the 60s, it was a new thing. A lot of airports came into being, so it was a high time for building airports, and he was lucky to work exactly in that field, and he didn't regret it, because of course the rewards were sometimes astonishing in various ways, especially when you are allowed or were allowed to be as creative as he was. And again, we are talking about the major airport in Paris. So, a prestigious location. Even outside, there are, when looked from the highway, you can tell, it's here is someone who understands sculpture and the sculptural side of architecture. This is the top view. Now we see the Terminal 2 from 1972 to 1982. I wrote wrongly 0 instead of 9. Again in Paris. We'll also see a very interesting airport in Indonesia, in Jakarta. And I like that work because I don't think it is easy to make an airport that somehow connects with the local culture. But I think he succeeded. I didn't see that airport. I think we have here 2 architects who actually live in Indonesia, and they probably landed on that airport. They know that airport. So I would welcome your intervention, Florian and Daliana. But the pictures I saw, I liked, and I'll arrive very soon there. But we are still in Paris for the moment. This is the Terminal 2, modules A and B. I mean, they have many so-called modules and terminals, maybe not just like in New York, but still, it's a big airport. And again, we see that with structure, he does a lot, because structure is not linear, it's not, it has a movement, And maybe in such programs it is enough. You don't need to add ornaments, because there is a certain ornamental sensitivity because of these curves that mysteriously recede, yet very logically at the same time. Now the airport, this is the airport I'm talking about. So Florian and Daliana, or Daliana, if you want to say something about it, you are much more entitled than me. So it was a work from 45 years ago. And this is just, the plan. No, maybe not, but it looks like kind of interesting. It almost looks like this is the project, but it might be that it's actually a picture of it. Anyway, I love the fact that it's the architectural language is very different, is more modest, almost traditional, but it's not a pastiche. It's not mimicking. I feel he did, or they did a good job here. What do you think, Florian and Daliana?
I totally agree. I mean, you see, like what you see right now in the background here, this specific roof is a traditional roof type. Which one exactly I can't tell, but maybe Daliana can.
It's called Joglo roof from Java.
And yeah, what I find interesting is, although it's a relatively big airport, it's with this low-pitched roofs, which is, I would say, yeah, like traditional Indonesian architecture to sort of shade the sun away. So you don't have these roofs very high up, but more on a human scale. Even though it's a big airport, it is not so imposing. You know, it's not so huge that you have like this massive central hall element. So it's sort of this linear pitched roofs, and then it branches out like a tree into this smaller joglo pavilions where you then step into the airplane. So first of all, it works quite well, and second, yeah, it gives actually surprisingly a human scale to an airport.
I think you expressed very well, Florian, what my intuition was. Yes, I think this is a great quality, you know, to make a large airport not imposing, almost with a certain intimacy and almost domesticity, and without becoming, sentimental. I think this is very difficult to do, and I think he and they, the team that worked on this project, because obviously he didn't work alone. I think they did a good job, and there are even so-called details which are convincing in terms of being that. If we look at this, even here, I see some kind of discrete and modern reference to the local culture.
Yes.
And in such a noble and simple way, if we are to compare with what he did with the melodramas of Michael Graves. I mean, here is an architect who understood that there is no room here for melodramas and for postmodernism. Yes, there is a respect for the local culture, but I think very subtly he makes a reference to the local culture without mimicking anything and without becoming, ideologically charged, or I don't know how. I like this work.
About the ideology, I'm not entirely sure if I can 100% agree, because I mean, Indonesia had this, like a lot of other countries who got their independence. It is important for the nation building to also have their own icons and own representation of what makes an Indonesian culture. And I would see this as a political project as well as, what happened in France under Charles. Sorry, what's the former president? I forgot the name. Yeah, it doesn't matter. But it is a nation building, so this airport is a very important airport, and it's a very important showpiece to to the world of what Indonesia stands for. However, I agree with you that it is sort of, it has its own ideas behind. It's not just a copy and one-to-one implementation on a larger scale. So he worked on it, put his own thoughts into it, and I think this is quite good. And in the beginning, when I came to this airport, I was a little bit puzzled. Do I really like it or not? And now they build another terminal, which is a sort of a very huge hall, and it's so bad that I actually start to understand by seeing the bad example next to it how well this one is actually.
I mean, I want to say something. It is really rare that Indonesia gets a foreign architect to do public building. So I read just now, and apparently there was a French and Indonesian government collaboration. I don't know if it's fully funded by the French government or half funded. I mean, this is done during Suharto era, so the second president. And it was, so they used French architect for this. To be honest, I don't think this is a perfect way of working with traditional architecture, because I see that the joglo roof shown in the previous picture copied directly and pasted there. I think it requires more interpretation of such traditional roof. I do not like it that it is just pasted like that there, but it's okay. I mean, it's an okay airport. I'm very used to this airport. It won an Aga Khan Award in 1995. Yeah, it's basically, yeah, it's fine. It's all right, but I don't think it's a great piece of architecture.
But Daliana, when I look at this picture, it's true, without knowing the specificities of the Indonesian culture, I see though a modern, architecture, even as a graphic work. If I would have to, interpret it just in terms of its qualities as a graphic work, to me this is I mean, I don't see anything folkish here. I had an intuition that yes, it is connected with the local culture, but I also see a level of abstraction and of modernity. Maybe I'm wrong, but this is what I feel. And also here, yes, I feel that this is in Indonesia, but not in a crushing way. I think it's discreet. Yes, there is and maybe you are, I mean, not maybe, you are more aware of certain things that I'm not, because you are there. But, and I understand what Florian said, that this was an important airport and that in an important moment in the development of the country and asserting the independence. But if I think of other examples where nationalistic interests were, kind of unavoidable, this I still think is rather discreet. And Florian himself said that it's not imposing. Anyway, you know it better because you have been there and you used it probably at least several times.
I mean, I'm sorry to say, but looking at the inconsistency of what Paul Andreu can do in his design, there is no consistency. It's more like a whore. I mean, in a way, he does anything that that is asked for. I don't know. I'm not really sure there is a consistency in his line of work, that he can do sometimes traditional architecture, sometimes a blob. It's a bit unclear for me. But of course, forgive me for saying this.
You said it's a bit what?
Unclear. What direction is he going? I mean, what is his red line in his, what's his consistency in architecture? I don't see it, except for he's doing airports and later concert halls.
Well, his consistency, the only appreciable quality in one's life. I mean, I have great, I know great artists and architects who said that actually, an oppressive form of consistency is a deficiency. because you need variety, I mean, multiplicity in unity. Yes, this was a work that was done in a special context, so he couldn't do what he did in China or at Charles de Gaulle. I'm not trying to defend him, I'm just trying to understand him. And, you know, I don't know, I would have been maybe a little bit disappointed to see that he repeated another Charles de Gaulle airport, you know, because it's a different culture, different time, a different society. Anyway, it was his attempt, and I think he's the only one. Unfortunately, I don't have other airports to show because he built in a few other countries, and I searched, but I couldn't find in the time I had at my disposal the proper images. Anyway, it's a subject to explore. Maybe you are disappointed by this kind of explicit, at least in this picture, reference to, you know, the local culture. But then, what is the alternative? To make airports in such a way that you don't know where you are, that the one in Japan looks like the one in Rio de Janeiro, and like the one in New York, and like the one in Paris. On the other hand, myself, I'm a little bit reluctant to assume tradition in explicit ways. I don't know. I don't know enough, neither about the conditions in which he worked and, you know, I don't know. Maybe for you, it's a little bit displeasing that he was too accommodating, if I understood correctly what Daliana wanted to say. Anyway.
I mean, one more thing, I find it quite interesting how our opinion is completely different here, especially if you see like me as being the foreigner and she being the local person. So actually, I never knew the opinion about this airport from her, so it's quite good to hear.
Yes,
thank you.
We had to wait for the birthday of Paul Andreu. Okay, no, it's interesting, and we can talk about this later also, because anyway, it was an interesting dialogue, and I will reflect on what both of you said. Okay, so we move forward. Now here he is almost like a shadow between two of his artworks. This was an exhibition I think he had in China. The thing is, although he was described as being a painter, I couldn't find his paintings except that self-portrait and this picture with two kind of interesting graphic works or artworks that he did there. But the picture is deficient a little bit. Anyway, we'll move forward. So, born in Bordeaux, France, Parisian architect Paul Andreu had a great desire to do things with his hands and with his head, and to always keep discovering something new. This is the last image or slide of this presentation, and we wish him happy birthday, and I hope you know, maybe in the future we'll discover new things about him.